Darkcast Network, indie pods with a dark side.
SUPCREEPS. Today we're diving into a conspiracy that's been floating around the HQ here at Creepy Confidential. After contemplating many of things that I have come across about West Virginia, I feel that I have formulated my very own conspiracy theory. It involves the Green Bank Telescope, West Virginia cryptids, and a section of land known as the United States National Radio Quiet Zone. I think the best way to tackle this is to split up the information about each of these parts and slowly string the pieces together. I know you creeps are asking, but Miss Creep, a telescope? Buckle up. In just a few short moments, you too will feel like Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, trying to track the conspiracy. And then you'll be just like me. Red strings on boards going from picture to picture, connecting cryptids, aliens, and West Virginia's telescope. So let's start our journey down this little rabbit hole, but very quietly. Before we begin today's episode, we want to welcome you to the Creepy Confidential Coffee Corner. We love coffee around here, and it's what keeps us fueled for those long hours of bringing the conspiracy theory strings together. Our 2024 February Coffee of the Month is Campfire Coffee. Family owned and operated out of Tacoma, Washington, they operate a brick and mortar store and also an online spot for you to get your fix. They roast their coffee over a campfire, the way people did it for hundreds, maybe thousands of years before industrial roasters became a thing, to give it a very robust taste that is absolute perfection. This episode, we are featuring the Mountain Top Espresso Blend. This is my go-to favorite. It's chocolatey, it's a little smoky, and it's all delicious. Our 2024 Coffees of the Month are not sponsored. We believe in shopping local and trying to put money back into businesses that help make our daily lives better. Go to welovecampfire.com and pick up this delicious blend while supplies last. Now, on to the show. Welcome to Creepy Confidential. I'm your host, Noelle, your resident weirdo Wisconsinite. I open case files on cryptids, cults, conspiracies, and other worldly creepy, with new cases, local lore, and live broadcasts. So get ready, creeps. It's Creepy Confidential. The journey of my conspiracy theory started when I began researching for episodes. Mothman, Flatwoods Monster, Indrid Cold, all of these are in West Virginia and located fairly close to one another. All three of these involve aliens or some sort of extraterrestrial being. But these aren't the only strange things in West Virginia. Sheepsquatch, Grafton Monster, and Wampus Cat, also in West Virginia. Which to me seems like a high concentration of some serious heavy hitters in the game of cryptids. But before we begin with that, let's do some Quentin Tarantino action, shall we? So there I was. It's the first week of December, and I'm on my way to Wheeling, West Virginia. I was on my way to go see a concert there in downtown Wheeling. Side note, the show was fantastic. Ice Nine Kills, and In This Moment will absolutely blow you away. But back to the story anyway. So I'm on my way. I wanted to get to Wheeling a little early and drop off my bags at the hotel, and in transit, I stopped to get a bite to eat. I'm sitting there at the Cracker Barrel, just off the highway, enjoying my chicken fried steak and sweet tea, when an idea pops into my head that perhaps there are other things near Wheeling that I should check out. I pull out my phone and type in the search bar, "Strange and unusual things you shouldn't miss in Wheeling, West Virginia." The Green Bank Telescope Conservatory was one of the first things that popped up in my search. I've personally never seen a large satellite dish or telescope like that, so I clicked the link. The very first few lines of information start the wheels to turn. It's the world's largest fully steerable radio telescope. The location is inside of an area called the United States National Radio Quiet Zone. And then, another part that got me was that this telescope is part of a government-funded project called Breakthrough Listen, looking to search over 1 million stars for artificial radio or laser signals. And the project is the most comprehensive search for extraterrestrial communication to date. Government funded to the price tag of $100 million to search for intelligent extraterrestrial communications in the universe. So let's start with this telescope. Then we'll move on to the quiet zone and the cryptids. This telescope isn't just a single part. The Green Bank Telescope Conservatory was one of the first things that popped up in my search. I've personally never seen a large satellite dish or telescope like that, so I clicked the link. The very first few lines of information start the wheels to turn. It's the world's largest fully steerable radio telescope. The location is inside of an area called the United States National Radio Quiet Zone. And then, another part that got me was that this telescope is part of a government-funded project called Breakthrough Listen, looking to search over 1 million stars for artificial radio or laser signals. And the project is the most comprehensive search for extraterrestrial communication to date. Government funded to the price tag of $100 million to search for intelligent extraterrestrial communications in the universe. So let's start with this telescope. Then we'll move on to the quiet zone and the cryptids. This telescope isn't just a single part. They also involve Breakthrough Message, Starshot, and Watch. Breakthrough Message hopes to create a message, quote, representative of humanity and planet Earth, end quote. Breakthrough Watch aims to identify and characterize Earth-sized rocky planets around Alpha Centauri and other stars within 20 light-years of Earth. Breakthrough Starshot is co-founded by everyone's favorite frenemy, Mark Zuckerberg, which that alone should make your hackles go up, and for a good reason. This project aims to send a swarm of probes to the nearest star, which seems pretty invasive not knowing exactly what is out there. To send a swarm of anything into the universe seems like a bad idea. But back to the telescope. This bad boy is 100 meters in diameter and collects an area of 2.34 acres of data. It's ginormous. First thing that comes to mind is why West Virginia? First of all, the space in places like New Mexico with an open area that isn't inhabited. Why choose this spot? What's so interesting about West Virginia? Before the current big boy model, a 300-foot version was first built in 1961, with it going online in 1962. But that's not the telescope that we see today. November 15th, 1988, 9:43 p.m. The telescope operator working in the building below starts to hear debris falling and quickly exits the building in time to witness it crumble and collapse. The next question in my mind is, why bother rebuilding this small telescope? The senators at the time, Robert Byrd and J. Rockefeller, were apparently fond of the telescope and felt that it would have an economic impact if the space were to become overtaken by shops and whatnot. Creeps, if your ears perked up when you heard J. Rockefeller, then you're amongst friends. Yes, of the Rockefellers. So another check mark in the odd box is why such a huge name like Rockefeller is associated and concerned about a satellite telescope in West Virginia. So where is this telescope, you ask? In Pocahontas County, located in between Sugar Grove Station and White Sulphur Springs in a town called Green Bank. All of this is located in the National Radio Quiet Zone, known as NRQZ, a 13,000 square mile piece of land. an area larger than the combined landmass of Connecticut and Massachusetts. Zone 1 of the quiet zone has a restriction on gasoline-powered motor vehicles. Because their spark ignition engines generate significant radio interference, resulting in the requirement that all vehicles and equipment be diesel-powered. Zone 2, also called Observatory Building Zone, only allows intentional radiators licensed by the NRQZ, but not Wi-Fi, cordless phones, and other wireless equipment. Not to mention digital cameras are also prohibited. Zone 3 and 4 are governed by the Radio Astronomy Zoning Act, which allows for these zones to be monitored and the interferences identified and documented. So they're watching them. Zone 5 is the boundary of the NRQC, where the inner QC administrator and the observatory manages the enforcement policies. In quite a few videos I found there's an actual truck, a diesel truck that's outfitted with equipment to drive around and pick up interferences that need to be dealt with. That's from homes, businesses, you name it. I understand the need for radio quiet, but it also kind of smells like a cover-up. This quiet zone was created in 1958 by the FCC. In my opinion, this is just another way that the government is involved in this and the protection of this area, but for what other reasons? But wait, there's more. The quiet zone also protects the antennas and receivers of the U.S. Navy's Information Operations Command at Sugar Grove, which I mentioned earlier. The NIOC is a location of electronic intelligence gathering systems, and even today is said to be one of the key stations operated by the NSA. At this point in the formation of my conspiracy, if you haven't put on your tinfoil hat, now's a good time. I'll wait. In the 50s, President Eisenhower proposed that Congress should build a fallout shelter in case of an attack from the Soviet Union. In 1956, Lyndon Johnson and the House Speaker authorized construction of a $14 million, or in today's money, $135 million, bunker capable of holding 1,100 people beneath the Greenbrier Resort in West Sulphur Springs, which I mentioned earlier. Apparently, after the bunker was revealed much later in 1992, a few local Green Bank individuals began wondering when they might finally learn the truth about their astronomy observatory. A neighbor to the observatory named Bob Sheets was quoted, quote, "There's always been a sentiment among people in the community and from around the state that there's something going on over there, there's something buried under the mountain, and that there's a subterranean tunnel all under there, spook stuff, and that because of the bleed over from Sugar Grove, because they really do spook stuff. And then you throw in the fact that the congressional bunker was built down at the Greenbrier, and you've got fruitful turf for conspiracy theories." End quote. Well, Bob, I agree. Because here I am, sprouting my ideas of conspiracy theories. Remember how I mentioned earlier that you could only use diesel engines in the quiet zone? Isn't that convenient that an EMP can't knock those out? I was reading this book called The Quiet Zone by Stephen Kirksey, which oddly enough is not really designed like I thought. It had a lot of information, but it's not a book built strictly for the conspiracy theories wanting to know what the quiet zone is all about. There's a lot of information in there. So I kind of picked out the section that I read the whole book, but the section in there about the quiet zone and spook, there's actually a chapter called Spook Stuff, is very good. In this book, the author was interviewing a gentleman named Anthony Minter, and of all things mentioned, it was what Minter asked the author. Did you ever consider that there were 50 other areas before Area 51? In the context of this gentleman speaking, I believe he's giving more of a funny ha-ha jab at what he considers comical conspiracies, but now I really am considering the other 50. And I will be looking into that, so don't you worry. Anyway, as I read on, I learned that the entire region was a government-classified nuclear fallout safety area. One more fun fact, before we move on to the next section to put it all together, is Operation Alert. Operation Alert was an annual defense drill from 1954 to 1961 that tested government and civilian readiness for World War III. It was during the first Operation Alert, when Eisenhower was in office, that the plan was to run away and hide in the Appalachian Mountains across Virginia, Maryland, and West Virginia. Creeps, I really hope you've been taking notes, because now it's time to draw the conspiracy lines all together. Or at least this is what happened in my mind. I'm not going to let this conspiracy go. I really do feel this way. So here we go. Home stretch. We're going to lay out some dates. September 1952. The Flatwoods Monster incident happened in Flatwoods, West Virginia, an extraterrestrial being that had crashed. 1956, creation of the National Radio Astronomy Observatory in West Virginia. 1958 is the groundbreaking ceremony for the smaller 140-foot version of the telescope. But in 1961, construction begins on the new telescope in Green Bank. And just to mention as a side piece of information for those who may need a refresher, 1961 is also the Barney and Betty Hill incident. It occurs north, but is one of the most famous alien abductions in U.S. history, and a little more than 12 hours north, but still something that was floating around in my mind. So I guess that's not West Virginia, but still. 1962, the Green Bank telescope goes online. 1965 is the first high signal to noise detection of radio combination lines at Green Bank. 1966, it's a busy year. For those nerds out there, you already know what's coming. 1966, in November, we see the Smiling Man, also known as Indrid Cold, pop up for the first time in West Virginia. In October, he popped up in New Jersey. I know away, but still something to note. Also occurring in November of 1966 is the infamous Mothman interaction in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. I know the nerds that really know about Mothman were like, here it comes. But that's when the big one happened. I know there were others, but that's like the most famous. December of 1967, the Silver Bridge collapses from a single eye-bar failure. 46 people are dead, 2 are never found. And then fast forward, November 15th, 1988, the 300-foot telescope collapses due to a single sheared metal gusset plate. These are just all kinds of pieces of information that have been dancing around in my head. Maybe it's just me, but all these things seem related. And in a relatively short amount of time, a lot of very famous incidents happens. What the heck is happening in West Virginia, and what does the U.S. government have to do with it? It isn't just Patch Adams and people who have sensitivities to EMF that are hanging out in Pocahontas. From spooks to specters to flying saucers, there's just too many things. Apparently, stargazing and pepperoni rolls aren't the only things that West Virginia is known for. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please stay tuned for a Darkcast Network preview presentation by the podcast Love and Murder.
Are you looking for your next true crime podcast? Do you crave stories that have mystery and suspense? Well, look no further. Introducing Love and Murder, the podcast that dives deep into the world of relationships gone horribly wrong. Every week, I take you on a journey through the dark side of love, where passion turns into obsession, family becomes enemies, and romance turns to murder. So why should you listen to Love and Murder? Because this is not just another true crime podcast. We're your partners in crime, your storytellers, and your weekly dose of suspenseful entertainment. So what are you waiting for? Join the LAM community, www.murderandlove.com. That's Love and Murder backwards, murderandlove.com. See you soon.